You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 9th of June 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead...
Iran and Hezbollah are weaker than ever, and we are stronger than ever. But our campaign against them is not yet over.
So says Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. We'll have the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. Then are China and Russia competing for influence over North Korea? What does Xi Jinping's visit to Pyongyang indicate? We'll have a look through the newspapers and join Accor's global vice president of sponsorship and events, who tells us why sport is such a good match for the brand. Plus,
Sweden has, throughout history, had fewer male smokers compared to the EU. The only way to explain is with snus, because it's usually males who like it.
We'll look at how Sweden became virtually smoke-free, have a roundup of business news, and finally, Japan is in the grip of a bear boom. And sure as bears defecate in the woods, and now apparently in the urban centres too, a bear economy is emerging alongside it. We'll ask why encounters are rising and who stands to profit. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. A US Army Apache helicopter crashed near the Strait of Hormuz, with both crew members rescued safely, as questions remain over whether it was brought down by hostile fire, mechanical failure or another cause. Taiwan staged major coastal defence exercises, simulating the destruction of a Chinese amphibious invasion force in one of its most realistic military drills to date. And Donald Trump became the first sitting US president to attend an NBA Finals game, drawing boos from parts of the Madison Square Garden crowd and causing major security disruption across Manhattan. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, Iran and Israel say they have stopped firing after their most direct confrontation since April's ceasefire, following an intervention by Donald Trump, who publicly demanded both sides stop shooting and personally called the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu. The immediate crisis may have eased, but the wider questions remain unresolved. Iran has warned it will strike again if Israel continues attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the broader US-Iran agreement is still unfinished. From Dubai, I'm joined now by Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent. Inzi, good to have you back on the show. How close did these events come to spiralling completely out of control?
Well, look, Georgina, I think they're probably seen as a major escalation, and probably the biggest escalation ever since the ceasefire was implemented back on the 8th of April. And it's been building up to a moment like this, because over the last couple of weeks we've seen the US and Iran in this kind of tit-for-tat firing, particularly around the southern coast of Iran near to the Strait of Hormuz. We've seen Iranian retaliations into Gulf states like Kuwait and Bahrain, where they managed to strike Kuwait International Airport, killing a few people and injuring dozens and dozens more, and then some targets in Bahrain were struck as well. So it's been building up to a moment like this, but it's of course the fighting inside Lebanon, which Iran didn't want to sit back and watch taking place. They've always said that if you attack Beirut, it's a red line for them. It was kind of baked into this memorandum of understanding that the US and Iran have been working towards as well. And after the Israelis targeted Beirut, or the southern or the outskirts of Beirut inside Lebanon on Sunday, then Iran retaliated with 4 rounds of these attacks. We're in this situation now, yes, where both sides have agreed that they will not fire upon each other, or they've said that their attacks have stopped provided the other side won't attack and provided that Israel won't target Lebanon once again. But very firmly their fingers are on the trigger, and it could spiral out of control at any moment, I think, Georgina.
So Donald Trump is claiming this as a diplomatic success. How much credit does he deserve?
Look, I'm sure he is, like he does with most situations. But look, it's very difficult. It's difficult to say whether it's been a diplomatic success or not, because Iran blamed President Trump for actually being in this situation in the first place. But also, you've got to look at the sequence of events. President Trump picked up the phone after the Iranian strikes landed into Israel, or many of them were intercepted from the Iron Dome. Some managed to get through, or debris managed to get through. And President Trump picked up the phone, called Benjamin Netanyahu and said to him, do not retaliate. He did not want to see Israeli strikes back into Iran as a result of the Iranian strikes. Clearly, the pressure had mounted on Benjamin Netanyahu, and he couldn't hold back, and he went against what the president had asked him to do. And I think that just gives you a sense of how these two men are clearly singing off the different hymn sheet at the minute. They're not on the same page whatsoever. They've both got different views around what Iran is doing, and I think that's potentially a worry going forward in this conflict, because does it mean that the US is trying to obviously get out of this conflict, is trying to get a deal, and does it mean that Israel will form its own path and carry out attacks when it feels like it wants to, whether it's in Lebanon or in retaliation to Iran?
Where does this leave Benjamin Netanyahu? Is he seen as weakened by Trump's intervention?
I think it's interesting because, look, Benjamin Netanyahu needs the support of President Trump in his own country, and that's very clear. You know, he needs that US backing. But the thing is how, and this is what a lot of the kind of Israeli opposition would be saying, and those putting pressure on Netanyahu, how can you just sit back, let Iran attack you, and then not do anything? And what I find incredibly interesting is after the phone call that President Trump had with Netanyahu telling him not to strike, Netanyahu then did strike, and then yesterday there was another phone call between the two men. And this is after President Trump said that I call the shots, that you will have to accept whatever deal that we make with Iran. What kind of a conversation would these two world leaders have after that? Now, President Trump in the last kind of hour or so has been speaking at JFK after watching that NBA match in New York. And he specifically said that he said to Benjamin Netanyahu, apparently, do what you need to do, but finish it off quickly, carry out your attacks, and then stop, because we need to get back to the negotiation table. His story kind of seems to be changing quite a bit, which I think is pretty typical for this president.
So, I mean, as we've established, Iran says future attacks depend on what happens in Lebanon. Has Lebanon now become the key to whether the ceasefire survives? Is it all down to Lebanon and Hezbollah?
I think it's a very, very major situation in this whole war, in fact, whether it's to do with the ceasefire, whether it's to do with getting a peace deal over the line as well. Lebanon plays a huge role, and effectively both sides are using Lebanon as a bit of a bargaining chip as well, particularly for Iran. They've said all along that the fighting inside Lebanon must stop. They've been very clear with that. And Mohammad Ghalibaf, who is the Iranian parliamentary speaker and Iran's chief negotiator when it comes to the talks between the US and Iran, he said that we have disrupted the equation of a ceasefire on paper and its repeated violations in the field. As long as you lack genuine will to build trust, Iran's response will be exactly this. So he openly said that because Israel violated the ceasefire, then we will violate the ceasefire as a result, and that's all down to Lebanon. And so we're in a situation now where Iran wants to see the Israeli troops get out of Lebanon. They want to see the attacks stopped inside of Lebanon, the airstrikes that have continued. But the problem you've got Hezbollah, who are also retaliating and firing rockets into northern Israel and are not involved in the ceasefire talks between the US, Israel and Lebanon. And I think that's where there is a huge flaw in all of this.
How much leverage does Iran have over Hezbollah?
Well, they've got considerable leverage, and there's conversations consistently between the IRGC and Hezbollah operatives, as well as Iranian officials as well. I think the problem that you've got is that even inside Iran, the Iranian military and the so-called kind of politicians, the guys who are trying to come up with a peace deal, aren't necessarily on the same page. They don't necessarily at all times see eye to eye, and effectively it is the military that is in power. Yes, they say the supreme leader is, but we don't know the situation of his health, whether he's got any direct control inside Iran, I'm talking. But then it's the same situation with Hezbollah as well. This is a military group at the end of the day. They will make the decisions that they want to make of who they attack, when they attack, and where they attack. And so it is solely down to them. The big question is how much of a control does the Lebanese government have over Hezbollah, or how much will Hezbollah listen to the Lebanese government? And clearly, throughout these ceasefire discussions that Lebanon have been having with Israel and the US, and they've been historic because it's the first time Lebanese government has met with the Israeli government in person. And I think clearly Hezbollah is not listening to what the Lebanese government is pleading for them to do, and that's to stop the fighting so Lebanon can essentially get back to some normality, which is far off.
And Inzi, just briefly, what's this doing to the oil markets?
Well, we've seen that oil prices climbed once again after these attacks on Sunday. The back and forth fighting between Israel and Iran spiked oil prices once again, and it's obviously all heavily down to the Strait of Hormuz as well, which very much remains in a situation where Iran's got control over the waterway and the US naval blockade is very much implemented there. And President Trump has said that the blockade will remain until he gets a good deal. And so we're in a situation right now where that, and I know we just said that Lebanon is a key, but the Strait of Hormuz also is very much a key in all of this. President Trump wants to get out of this conflict. He wants to get the Strait of Hormuz open. The world economy wants to get the Strait of Hormuz open because the impact is severe, whether you are in the UK or whether you're in the Far East. There is impact right across the globe as a result of the Strait of Hormuz being shut by Iran and with this US naval blockade. And we see that with prices not just in oil, but obviously food and supermarket prices, because fertilizer has been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz as well. And so the economy is struggling as a result. And I just want to make an important note as well, Georgina, is that if the Strait of Hormuz, say, does get open later this week and there's a deal signed off, which is very unlikely, but if it does, it will still take 4 months, at least 4 months, for it to get back to normality. So we will still see the economy struck hard as a result of the Strait of Hormuz even opening.
Inzi, thank you very much indeed. That was our Gulf correspondent Inzamam Rashid in Dubai. This is The Globalist. It is 15:12 in Pyongyang, 7:12 here in London. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in North Korea for his first visit in 7 years. But this is not the same relationship he left behind in 2019. Since then, Kim Jong-un has built much closer ties with Russia, sending troops and weapons to support Moscow's war in Ukraine in exchange for military and economic support. Xi's visit is a reminder that China remains North Korea's most important partner, but it may also be an acknowledgement that Beijing now has competition. I'm joined by John Everard in the studio. John is, of course, the former British ambassador to Belarus and North Korea. John, lovely to have you back on the show. Has North Korea become less dependent on China?
No. It has managed to extract a great deal of money from Russia. Nobody's sure of the sums, but they must be considerable, in exchange for sending troops to fight the Ukrainians on Russian soil and huge deliveries of munitions. But North Korea remains heavily aid-dependent. I mean, this is not a flourishing economy. And the major aid donor, by a long, long way, is China. China doesn't publish figures, not least because North Korea is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative, so isn't part of that sort of statistical gathering. But Chinese officials, through clenched teeth, have told me that the sums are very large indeed. No, North Korea still depends on China.
So what's in it for China to support North Korea?
I think that, a lot of commentators have said this is all about China trying to rebalance the relationship, make clear to North Korea that it matters rather than Russia. I'm not so sure. Firstly, why would China worry that Russia and North Korea are getting close? They're both under China's aegis, so to speak. And China, as I've just said, has to give an awful lot of money to North Korea. If the Russians are chipping in to help the North Korean economy, I think they'd be clapping in Beijing. I think we're looking in the wrong place. I think this is all to do with Japan. Back 7 27 November, Prime Minister Takaichi made that thunderbolt declaration in the Diet that if Taiwan were attacked, this might be an existential matter for Japan, which is code for this might trigger activity by the Japanese self-defense forces. She was apoplectic. Even by the time of President Trump's visit to Beijing just a few weeks ago, he was still fuming. It's the one time in that visit where he got really angry. I think this is Xi signalling to the wider neighbourhood, especially to Japan, that China will stand by its allies, that China has friends, and not to mess with Taiwan.
So there's also speculation that she could be carrying messages from Washington. What's your opinion on that?
Utter rubbish. No way to do that.
OK. Why do you say that?
Why would she want to facilitate a rapprochement between Kim Jong-un and President Trump? Makes no sense at all in Chinese foreign policy. If China were hypothetically to carry a message, there's no way that she personally would act as Donald Trump's errand boy. That would be just humiliating. No, this isn't so.
Do you think that Beijing can offer Kim Jong-un things that Moscow can't, other than money?
No, but it can offer a great deal more money than Moscow. As we all know, the Russian economy is in deep trouble. I mean, the Chinese economy isn't doing brilliantly either, but it's nowhere near the Russian doldrums. And Russia simply cannot match the amounts of money that Beijing can put on the table to help North Korea. So money, also some political support. Beijing carries a lot more weight on the world stage these days than Russia, which in certain areas could be very useful for North Korea.
And do you think that Kim now has the leverage to play China and Russia against each other? And what would be the benefit?
No, this is a throwback to a lost world. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim's father and grandfather, made a great game of playing Russia and China off against each other. But the world just isn't like that anymore. Russia is now heavily, heavily dependent on China. What we have is a triangle, fine, or a square if you bring in Iran, but with China very much at the apex as big brother, as the rich guy, as the powerful military force. I just don't think that China thinks of Russia in terms of an equal. Russia is a junior partner in its relationship with China. If Russia wants to go and make whoopee with North Korea, China is most unlikely to object.
And finally, John, is she going to be looking at nuclear issues in Pyongyang at all?
Pointedly not. A few years ago, before the pandemic, China, every time Chinese leaders met North Korean leaders, they talked about denuclearization. China was clearly deeply unhappy about North Korea's nuclear program. Then all of a sudden, China stopped talking about this and hasn't done so for some years. And in the official statements coming out of this summit, it hasn't been mentioned at all. It looks like China and North Korea have done a deal over the nuclear program. And we'll probably never know the detail, but I suspect the broad outlines are we will stop insisting that you abandon your nuclear program provided you don't do anything really stupid like a further nuclear test. And North Korea, sure enough, hasn't tested a nuclear device for a long time now.
John, thank you very much indeed. That's John Everard there, former British ambassador to Belarus and North Korea. Now, still to come on the programme.
The future is really about bringing immersive experience, bringing their DIP into our hospitality world, and not only, I would say, in our home country, but all over the world.
That is Solène D'Argenton, who is Accor's Global Vice President of Sponsorship and Events. This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office Houseview, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. I'm Georgina Godwin, and we're going to continue now with today's newspapers. Joining me is Vincent McAviney, journalist and Monocle Radio regular. Hello to you, Vinny.
Good morning.
You're looking very cheerful this morning.
Well, it's a nice sunny day in London, isn't it?
Is it? Well, I don't know. It was dark when I got here.
Oh, okay. The sun has come up after quite a few days of rain. So.
Let's talk about a sunny place, the Sunshine State, California. Trump is kind of telling us, I think he's giving us a bit of a signal about what's going to happen in November. His party probably will do very badly in the midterms by claiming fraud in the California vote.
Yeah, I think he's beta testing his lines for November. This is the California elections, and specifically one individual, Spencer Pratt, villain from The Hills, the MTV TV show in the 2000s. You're pretty happy if you're Lauren Conrad this morning, who was the protagonist of that show, he was the villain essentially, and he has lost his attempt to try to get through to the runoff for mayor of LA. And this is part of the process that we can see that Donald Trump is likely to attack, because what has gone on is there have been several days of counting where his majority has slowly been cut. And apart from incumbent Karen Bass, you've got Nithya Raman has now overtaken him, another Democrat, to run against her. And what the Republicans are doing, and specifically Trump, is trying to say that this is fraudulent, that this is wrong. But actually, part of this is because the votes take longer to count because you've got a lot of mail-in ballots, something that Trump is also trying to crack down on. And it's being dubbed the Red Mirage. It's what happened in 2020 with Donald Trump in the general election, where as time went on and you got more ballots counted and more in, his sort of lead was cut and he ultimately lost. Now, why this is really important in California in particular on these attacks is that currently the Republicans hold the House by about 4 seats. It's a very thin majority. Gavin Newsom, the outgoing governor of California, has brought in legislation which sees redistricting. He wants to try and balance off the redistricting that we've seen in Republican states like Texas. And it could be that there are 5 seats in California that flip from Republican to Democrat as a result of this. So attacking not only this sort of process and mail-in ballots, but specifically California is a big part of Trump's strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Siri, tell us what the IPO of ChatGPT is worth.
Yeah, we've got a double AI story here. So first of all, last night, I mean, it's quite remarkable, really, that it's been less reported on over the years. But Apple's had a bit of a disaster when it comes to AI. For so long, the dominant tech hardware company, it's really fallen behind in this part of its software. So a couple of years ago, it launched what it was calling Siri AI, and it promised in adverts a whole bunch of very interesting features which never came to pass. And the company, in fact, a few weeks ago, lost they settled a $250 million lawsuit from some consumers about these failed products, which, they had launched adverts with celebrities in them highlighting these new features that just never came about. And it's because they actually could not get them to work. And so this is part of the legacy of Tim Cook, that perhaps he failed to move quickly enough on AI. Last night in California, they launched Siri AI, which will have access to your emails, messages, calendars and photos, but will be a lot more private, they're saying. That's their whole sort of USP these days. They've had to go, though, to Google to get the backing on the software support and sort of integrate it with their own system. So this is a big change from Apple after what has been quite a significant stumble. But another bit of big news from California last night, OpenAI, which will sort of be the trilogy of these huge IPOs that we're seeing this year. So this week we've got SpaceX on Friday. We've got the makers of Claude AI also IPOing, and we've got OpenAI IPOing as well. They've not said when it will happen. They've said they've got to do some things before they announce that, but this will be a sort of big blockbuster event.
Absolutely. Another big blockbuster event this time in New York was the Knicks game. Now, I don't know if you've been following this. I'm certainly not a basketball fan, but I was in America a couple of weeks ago and people were cancelling plans left, right and centre because very surprisingly, the Knicks kept winning. And they were like, no, they never win. We have to go to the game.
Well, I mean, this is how long it's been since they've been in this position. In the photos of celebrities watching the last time the Knicks got to this stage, One of the people in the front row was John F. Kennedy Jr.
Wow.
That is, it's quite an extraordinary little time capsule of people that were sort of famous in 99 seeing this. But yeah, Donald Trump announced, much to the chagrin of New Yorkers, that he was going to go to the game last minute. That meant that they all suddenly received an email on the morning telling them that they had to go through airport-style security to arrive 3 hours earlier. This caused inevitable chaos. New Yorkers aren't backwards in coming forwards, are they? So they let their feelings know, not just about that sort of disruption to their lives, but also their feelings towards him with a huge boo last night. Interestingly enough, as well, it was during the national anthem. Americans incredibly respectful when it comes to, the national anthem and, the flag and everything else. But when Trump appeared on the Jumbotron, the booing was overwhelming. And he was sitting in a boxer watching it all with his granddaughter. But at times, as we have seen in this past 2 weeks, he's rushed out another health report saying he's all great and good. But he seems at one point to fall asleep. He is not looking particularly well. We saw in that Meet the Press interview on Sunday, particularly tetchy. He looks very bloated and very red at the moment as well. So I think his appearance there is going to spark more questions about his health.
And I mean, the whole point about this game was so, local bars are meant to do very well. There's going to be big watch parties, all of that, lots of footfall. None of that happened because the whole place was just put into a steel ring. And it really disadvantaged New Yorkers.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is the wonderful feeling that New Yorkers had over the last few weeks while the Knicks have been winning. I'm told that it feels like a kind of wonderful sense of community, that people are speaking to each other. Mandami famously sat in the nosebleed seats. He spent nearly $1,000 on his seat for this game.
He passed a bill, didn't he, that cancelled bedtime for New York children as well. So that they could
he's been fantastic around this. And I'm not at all surprised that Trump was booed.
Well, he's a reverse Midas. Sort of, everything he touches turns to shit, basically, doesn't it?
Well, but what people are saying now is that he's bad luck for the Knicks. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. Now to Spain and a total eclipse.
Yes, three eclipses. So Spain has got over the next 2 years 2 daytime eclipses and 1 nighttime eclipse, which is really extraordinary. If you've never seen an eclipse, I can remember the eclipse in 1999 that happened here in the UK, and I wasn't even in sort of the direct line of eclipse. We had a sort of about 70% where I was, and it was quite extraordinary. And Spain has got one this August. It will have in the sort of north, going sort of southeast, basically through sort of Catalonia, and then there'll be another one the following year in the sort of more the south of the country. But this is a really good story in Le Monde about the Spanish state sort of not really being quite ready for it, because they've known about this obviously coming for a while, and centrally the sort of science departments were trying to say to local mayors, you need to get ready because it brings in potentially millions of tourists. It's bringing in potentially hundreds of millions of euros to the nation's kitties, but they've only just really clocked that they need to sort of designate special areas where people, you basically, they've done tests so that you can see everything that you need without being obstructed by buildings, and to have the parking and facilities available so that people at the last minute don't just sort of pour onto the roads and cause chaos, and then everyone's getting out of their cars to try and watch it, and you're blocking emergency routes potentially. So it should be quite an extraordinary thing, but Spain kind of playing catch up at the moment to be ready to provide the facilities for people to see this properly.
I remember that 99 total eclipse, and we were in a totality zone in Zimbabwe, and it was quite extraordinary. And the way all the animals go completely silent, and it's very eerie.
You can see why throughout history, when eclipses have happened, people have seen them as because obviously this was before understanding of what was going on. But as you say, I can remember that. I can remember sort of all the birds going quiet and sort of disappearing from the sky, and they sort of have this feeling that something is going on, and you can kind of see why it's really captured the imagination through history, but also become symbolic of something big is going to happen. It's got a lot of symbolism in literature, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly in literature. In fact, if you want to read about my total eclipse experience, it is documented in the book When a Crocodile Eats the Sun, which is the Shona. Yeah, but that's the Shona phrase for a total eclipse. It's the crocodile eating the sun, taking bites out of it. It's a kind of really lovely metaphor for what happens, I think.
Yeah, available in all good books.
Vincent McAvinney, thank you very much indeed. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. A US Army Apache helicopter went down near the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, though both crew members were rescued unharmed. Officials have not yet determined whether the aircraft was hit by Iranian fire, suffered a mechanical failure, or encountered another problem. Taiwan's military fired rockets, artillery and anti-tank weapons in a large-scale exercise designed to repel a Chinese amphibious landing. The drills reflected Taipei's push to make military training more realistic as pressure from Beijing continues to grow. And Donald Trump was booed by some fans as he entered the NBA Finals between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs at Madison Square Garden. His appearance triggered an extensive security operation that disrupted traffic, businesses and public viewing events across central Manhattan. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. An official supplier of Roland Garros since 2015 and now an official partner since 2024, all Accor are no stranger to championing major competitions. From the Paris Olympics, Rugby World Cup to Paris Saint-Germain, athletic events have become central to Accor's identity. In France, a country famous worldwide for fashion, gastronomy and culture, it's sport that's increasingly the best bedfellow for hotel brands. Monocle's Tom Webb spoke with Soledad Janton, Accor's Global Vice President of Sponsorship and Events, about the strategy behind the collaboration and the growing role of sport within the company's brand portfolio.
So basically, we are in partnership with Roland Garros and the French Federation of Tennis for 10 years. I would say we elevated our partnership 2 years ago because the idea was really to switch from, I would say, a corporate hospitality platform and a member platform to a true and 360-degree marketing platform. And it's true for Roland Garros, but not only for Roland Garros. But when we look at our portfolio strategy in terms of sponsorship, it always starts with business, of course. So where are our audience? Where does they come from? Where does tennis resonate? Where is the hotel buyer audience coming from? How does the tennis perform within this hotel buyer's audience? So this is really what I would say it's a starting point to build a portfolio strategy. When we zoom in Roland Garros in the tennis world, obviously as a French company, we have a lot of business stakes in Paris. But not only that, because when you look at whether it is the corporate hospitality we manage to bring in, when you look at the Roland Garros, I would say media audience, but also the nationality of the member we managed to reach and to embark, I would say, in the opportunity to redeem the point to come to Roland Garros, it's truly international. So this is why we have this partnership. It all starts with audience, so media audience and physical presence.
And France, of course, is famous for fashion and food. Why have you chosen sport? You've had the Paris Olympics and rugby. Is there a particular moment that's happening in the country?
So we try also to have a balanced portfolio because, of course, major events happens rarely, and especially even more when we talk about Olympics or Rugby World Cup. And so I would say the strategy was a bit different when you think about these two major events of rugby and Olympics, because it was truly about welcoming the world into our country. So it's about, I would say, hospitality, and we are Accor being one of the biggest global player. Of course, we have to welcome the world. It makes sense from a business perspective and also from a marketing perspective. But I would say that it was more a one-off. When back to Roland Garros and back to French Federation, this is, of course, 3 weeks in a row every year. It is also Roland Garros Junior Series, where we selected Next Generation, which takes place in Brazil and in Japan. So it is a more regular rendezvous, that we can build with our different stakeholders throughout the year. But also when you look at, again, our media audience and the value, the image that Roland Garros and Accor are sharing, this is really where the sweet spot here compared to any other, I would say, major event or tournament in the tennis.
You talk about similarities and you talk about hospitality, but what does all Accor and Roland Garros have in common in terms of bringing people in and welcoming them?
All Accor today, it's a very wide platform. Of course, it all starts with a loyalty program where hotel buyers and hotel users become members. And it starts, I would say, with a more transactional interaction. But the idea of having this sponsorship portfolio leverage with the loyalty program is truly also to become, to go beyond, the hotel stay, to go beyond being a hospitality platform and really to be able to deliver on the promise to be a lifestyle platform and to help and to open access to our members to unique, events. So it's unique, in terms of, because we know that Roland Garros is super busy. We know that playing with a former player is not even something accessible if you're not a sponsorship. So the idea is really also to connect, emotionally with our member, with passion that resonate for them and deliver all throughout the year on the promise of live a limitless experience. So money can buy moments through their loyal program.
And finally, looking at your wider sponsorship strategy and your other partnerships that you've got with Paris Saint-Germain, how do you see this evolving over the next few years?
Good question. I think that what we've started because again, so we have different ways of leveraging and building our portfolio. What is very important for us, and I say us is like at global level, is always making sure that we have a balanced portfolio in terms of geographic footprint, in terms of top passion point, because of course, sports is one of the top, but not only that, we have also to answer entertainment and gastronomy passion point of our hotel user and member. And also, I would say support where the development of our pipeline is going to be in the coming years. So it's a mix of the three. As you know, it's multi-year partnership to make sure that we get the most out of it, to install them, in terms of media, in terms of rendezvous, in terms of experience. So we see it as true marketing platform, not only focusing on the event, on the physical event. So whether it is the tournament of Roland Garros or Paris Saint-Germain football game, home game, it's also about really building moments and building those IP out, I would say, of their home venue, home stadium, to bring it in our hotel. So the future is really about bringing immersive experience, bringing their DIP into our hospitality world, and not only, I would say, in our home country, but all over the world. And we have various meaning to do it.
Soledad Janton, Accor's Global Vice President of Sponsorship and Events, speaking to Monocle's Tom Webb. This is Monocle Radio. It's been confirmed that Sweden hit a major milestone last year. It became, according to the definition offered by bodies such as the World Health Organization, a smoke-free country, meaning less than 5% of the population smokes daily. Sander Brett, editor at Fika Online, a blog dedicated to Nordic lifestyle, asked how Sweden achieved such success and what other nations could take from it in their own efforts to reduce the number of regular smokers.
We've long known that cigarettes are dangerous, and political plans to reduce smoking have therefore been commonplace across Europe for more than half a century. Rewind only to the 1980s, though, and in Sweden, as in many other countries, more than a quarter of the population lit up daily, pretty much wherever they felt like it. It is impressive, then, that the number of daily smokers last year dropped below 5%, which meant that Sweden could officially be declared smoke-free, using the definitions of bodies such as the World Health Organization. The secret? Well, to a certain extent, Sweden has just followed the same path as its neighbours when it comes to legislation. Warning labels and marketing restrictions have been around for decades. 18 became the minimum purchase age for tobacco products in the late 1990s, and comprehensive indoor smoking bans arrived in the 2000s. But given its percentage of daily smokers has long been lower than the EU average, it must have been doing something differently. Jessica Perkins is a representative of Smoke-Free Sweden, a movement that encourages other countries to follow the Swedish model towards tobacco harm reduction.
By the 1980s, rates were declining, but the acceleration only really came much later. So between 2006 and 2020, Sweden recorded a 60% decrease in smoking rates, which is the biggest reduction of any EU country, driven by the arrival of newer products like vapes and nicotine pouches alongside snus.
And there we've stumbled across the magic word, the product that surely has made all the difference. Snus. Bags of powdered tobacco placed under the lip and part of Swedish culture for centuries. Research published by CAN, the Swedish Council for Information on Alcohol and Other Drugs, based on responses from around 18,000 Swedes, says 22% of respondents last year used snus in the past month, and the majority of them daily. David Sundén is an economist who's researched the decline of smoking in Sweden.
If you look at the data, eyeball econometrics we call it, you see that Sweden has, throughout history, had fewer male smokers compared to the EU or Europe as an average. The only way to explain is with snus, because it's usually males who like it. And when nicotine pouches were introduced in Norway and Sweden, you saw an immediate effect among the women. I would say that's a really strong case for nicotine pouches and snus having a substitution effect.
Of course, vaping is another alternative nowadays too. I asked Jessica Perkins if any specific sections of society were targeted in campaigns to cut smoking.
Young people was one section of society. The legislation specifically targeted youth from early on, and the results have been remarkable. Just 3% of Swedes aged 16 to 29 now smoke, compared to an EU average of around 18%.
Naturally, though, while this milestone is massive and the falling figures around the younger generation encouraging, almost 5% of Swedes do still smoke daily. So where are those smokers who stick at it? And can they too be weaned off? Jessica Perkins again.
So the remaining 5% is actually the hardest to reach. Heavily dependent smokers, those from more vulnerable backgrounds, or those who simply don't want to quit. Getting from 5% to 2% or 3% is arguably harder than getting from 25% to 10%.
David Sundén.
I think from the age of 35 and up, that's where the bulk of these 5% are. There's also a shift from smoking daily to smoking at parties, and see it as like having a Friday night drink or something like that. So there's quite a lot of smokers with a sort of, I've smoked the last 30 days or something like that, but not daily.
Yes, remember, it's only daily smokers whose numbers have fallen below 5%. Indeed, Lila Maripur, senior analyst at the Public Health Agency of Sweden, tells me occasional smoking is almost as prevalent as daily smoking. And in 2024, 6% reported smoking occasionally, the highest proportion of those among those aged 16 to 29. Returning to the subject of regular smokers, however, I asked David Sundén if their ranks will ever run dry entirely. He doesn't beat about the bush in his response.
No, I don't think it's possible to push it down to zero. Maybe it's not necessary to push it down, because basically those who are 35 and hardcore smokers, they have 35 years left. So maybe that's the answer. In 35 years, maybe we see no smokers.
So not zero for now, but close. And if trends continue, Sweden is ever closer to zero by the year. If other countries to catch up and cut down their numbers of smokers, they do well to look north.
That was Xander Brett, editor at Fika Online in Stockholm. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Well, it's time for some business news, and I'm joined by Vicky Price, economist and former joint head of the UK Government's Economic Service. Vicky, it's lovely to have you back on the show. Shall we start with France and Germany, who've abandoned plans to build a fighter jet. Why is that?
Well, yes. Good morning. That's a real blow, of course, to anyone who's looking at Europe to build enough defense capability jointly, so cooperation across countries to make sure that one rises to the challenge, if you like, of the US sort of withdrawing from supposedly support for NATO. Well, we'll see how all that develops, but also ensuring and insisting, in fact, that the rest of the NATO members spend more on their defense. But the whole idea of a Europe is that one should be working together to get some competitive advantage and also cut some of the costs and produce something better at the end of the day. Well, there have been discussions on this even before President Trump's second term and also before the Iran war, that perhaps something like that could develop, and there could be a replacement for the various fighter bombers that exist already. The idea was that you're going to be having Dassault Aviation, which is the French military plane maker, and then Germany's Airbus division, which would be working with the French, and Spain was also represented in the project. And the whole idea was that there was going to be this new combat plane that was going to be set up. 9 years of discussions, and it seems to have come to an end as of now. I think this morning, the announcement was that this was no longer going to be happening. What's happening basically is that there's been disagreement between the two companies, and the French wanted something different than the Germans did. They didn't want to apparently share management or any of the sort of IP that they had. So I'm afraid that's it as far as cooperation is concerned. But there is another project going on, which is run and backed, if you like, by the UK, which is called the sort of Global Combat Air Program, where we have Japan and Italy involved. And it looks like perhaps the Germans might join that. And that's actually quite hopeful. There's about 6 billion, which has been earmarked for it by the UK in its new defense investment program. We're going to get a little bit more of that detail later this week, but it seems to be an alternative, and maybe that will be the solution. So that's something perhaps that looks a little bit positive looking ahead.
Mm-hmm. Now let's have a look to the US, where inflation data comes out tomorrow.
Yes, well, the whole all those Fed watchers is what's going to happen with the new head of the Fed. Is he going to fall under the sort of pressure of President Trump and go for a cut in interest rates as he would like to see, or is he going to actually look at what's actually happening in the underlying economy, because costs are going up, inflation has been picking up, and also the economy has been doing better than perhaps had been anticipated. We've got some good jobs reports coming out, which was quite positive for the economy, so a bit more positive than perhaps people had anticipated. So if anything, the bet should be for a hike in interest rates in the US. But there is pressure, there is no doubt political pressure. The expectation, therefore, is that perhaps we're not going to see anything very much happening when the meeting sort of takes place later this month. But it's all up for grabs, actually, because we see what the data says. If inflation has really picked up, then I think it's going to be rather difficult to avoid having a hike.
And tell me, how has what's going on in Iran affected the economy?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons, of course, why perhaps inflation will be going up. I mean, the interesting thing is that we had these ups and downs in terms of oil prices. We had these ups and downs in terms of inflation expectations, and therefore what interest rates might be. And I think a lot depends on where we think the outlook might go. What we've seen over the last few days is that there was a big concern about hostilities starting again, particularly between Iran and Israel. And of course, oil prices went up and the stock markets went down. What's happened now, of course, is if you look at oil prices today, they are for WTI below $90 a barrel, which we haven't seen for a bit. Brent is also coming down a little bit, so that's quite hopeful because, of course, there's been an announcement now of the end of the latest round of hostilities between the two countries. If that indeed is the case and things continue like that, then we might actually see, even if the Fed is about to decide anything at all on interest rates, and then we have the European Central Bank, of course, and the UK Bank of England, deciding that perhaps their expectations of inflation might be a little bit lower than would otherwise be the case, and we might actually see a benign interest rate environment. I think it matters a lot, but stock markets are certainly quite disturbed by all this. We saw a real sell-off. Added to that, of course, lots of concerns about AI bubble in the last day or so, and then of course, partly because of that end of hostilities, maybe will last for longer. Let's keep fingers crossed. We've seen stock markets recover a little bit, and perhaps therefore, the outlook may be a little bit better than we had anticipated. But it's all up for grabs, as I said before. It's a little bit volatile right now. It's been volatile, of course, for a while, and we have all this AI. IPOs coming up, so that would be quite an interesting time to test how the market is feeling, confident or otherwise.
Our correspondent earlier was saying that even if the Strait of Hormuz opens today, we're looking at least 4 months of economic impact from what's happened there in terms of things like fertilizer delays and so on. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. In fact, some people are putting it for much, much longer. Fertilizer prices have already gone up and supply constraints are there. There's no doubt about that. People worrying about food. But of course, loads of other areas have been affected as well. If you just look at metal prices going up sort of very significantly, shortages sort of appearing in a number of areas that people are worried about coming out of the region, including for some of the rare earths coming into, so say, battery production and into EVs and sort of technologies being affected. So, and anything that causes any delay in terms of, the speed of delivery being affected, then that tends to raise prices quite significantly. So there's a strong correlation between the two. We saw that during the COVID period when supply constraints then were reflected in much higher prices. And that's why when you look at inflation forecasts, they really differ. Some forecasts are really quite worrying, forecasting inflation possibly to double. Others think that perhaps it's only going to be a few months and therefore inflation isn't going to be that affected. But the one good point about inflation and worries about that people have is that wages are not really picking up because it's not really a demand issue. It's more a supply constraint. And if that is the case, then perhaps the whole inflation outlook would be slightly more benign than people think.
And finally, Vicky, very quick look at the Asian markets. What are they doing?
Well, they are recovering. They have recovered overnight a little bit because of all these issues that we've just been talking about. First of all, that the Wall Street seems to have recovered, and therefore the whole AI bubble concern seems to have eased a little bit. And second, of course, that oil prices have been coming down, and maybe there is a hope that the ceasefire between Iran and Israel will hold at least, and maybe there will be some progress on the Strait of Hormuz as well.
Vicky Price, thank you very much indeed. Vicky's an economist and the former joint head of the UK government's economic service. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
A bear roaming the streets of a city north of Tokyo has forced the closure of nearly 100 schools. Bear sightings, attacks and emergency warnings are rising across Japan, while companies are cashing in with products such as anti-bear drones to bear spray rental services. So is this a nationwide obsession or a genuine problem? Well, to discuss that, I'm joined from Tokyo by Richard Lloyd Parry, Asia editor for The Times. Richard, good morning to you. What on earth is going on with the bears?
Well, the bears are extremely active, more than they really have ever been in living memory. I mean, Japan's always had bears. They have great big brown bears in the northern island of Hokkaido, which are a bit like grizzlies. And then in Honshu, the main island, they have these smaller black bears. And, over the years, occasionally they would get spotted in the mountains by hunters, by hikers, by people, foraging for mushrooms and so on. But in the last few years, increasingly in the last 2-3 years, they have been encroaching on human settlements. And yeah, it's easy to kind of smile about it and make a bit of a joke of it. But yeah, I mean, the figures show that more and more people every year are being attacked by bears and killed by bears. I think since last year in April, 13 people have been killed in bear attacks, and that's never happened before.
So why is this happening, and why are they turning up in towns and cities?
Well, it's complicated. It has to do with climate change. That seems clear. The food that the bears depend on, which are kind of mountain fruits, nuts, things like that, are not as abundant, and they're not blossoming and fruiting at the time they normally do, which means that when the bears, towards the end of the summer and the early autumn, are stocking up for their winter hibernation, they can't find what they need, so they have to go further afield. And it also, I mean, you often hear with these sort of stories that it's about humans encroaching on the bear's habitat. But actually, in this case, it seems to be the opposite, that a lot of towns or villages in the Japanese countryside are shrinking because the populations are aging, people are dying off, younger people are moving to the cities. So people who formerly lived on the edges of town in little kind of farms at the bottom of the mountain, these places are being abandoned, and the fruit trees are going wild. Nobody's picking them, harvesting them. Some of the fields are left to run wild. And this for the bears is, like free food. And they come down, there's no one to challenge them, scare them away. There are no fences, they're not fixed. And they just get used to coming into human settlements. And when they've done it once, it's easier and less scary the next time.
Who's making money from this?
Well, they're certainly selling a lot more bear spray. I mean, bear spray, from what I can work out, is just a kind of pepper spray. It's the same thing that in Western countries, a woman walking home through the park might carry in a handbag to fend off a human attacker. So, I mean, there's that stuff is selling. There's a company that has made rather an impressive looking, it's called a monster wolf, and it costs $4,000. And it's a kind of rather comical looking, scary wolf face that makes horrible noises when triggered by the proximity of a bear or someone coming close to it. So they've run out of stock of those. And the traditional method, if you're hiking in the mountains in Japan, is just to carry a bell on your backpack so that you don't surprise any bears. At least they can hear you coming. That's good advice.
Are the bears becoming cleverer? Are there any examples of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that, bear biologists or psychologists have formally concluded that, but there's lots of anecdote suggesting that they are, losing their fear. There was a case a few days ago, I think just last week, of a bear that appeared to have opened a window to get into a factory, which was on the edge of the town, to go inside and investigate and snaffle up some food that had been left around. So that, I'm sure, does count as intelligence. And opening windows is not something even Japanese bears are known for.
No. So, Richard, finally, should we expect another summer of bear-related headlines? I mean, is that to be guaranteed in the way that ursine creatures defecate in arboreal regions?
I think so. I mean, just as bears do that in the countryside, and just as the Pope is a Catholic, I think more bear mayhem is guaranteed. I'm prepared to stake my reputation on the prediction.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. That's Richard Lloyd-Parry in Tokyo. He's Asia editor for The Times, and do look out his work. He has a fantastic new book out. And if you want to read more about possible serial killer bears, there's also a great book called Astronaut! By Juana Aristide, and it's very funny and blames a crime on a bear, if that's what rocked your boat. That's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers Tom Webb, Joanna Mosa and Anita Riotta, our researcher Josefina Gomez, and our studio manager Lily Austin, with editing assistance by Christy O'Grady. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and the briefing is live at midday in London. The Globalist will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.